Oscar Jimenez, which Oscar, I remember speaking with you a couple of years ago when I was doing transactions in Missouri. And I remember I think you were starting to do deals there or something like that. And you reached out. And to now, to now you are buying multifamily. You guys have already purchased two properties, I believe, and have one under contract, if correct
Yep.
me if I'm wrong.
Yep.
And just killing the game, killing the multifamily game. I'm not sure if you still like wholesale or do anything like
We do.
that. Okay. So just tell me a little bit about the journey because I mean, I remember speaking with you before and to where you are now, it's just like a whole different world, you know? And so tell us a little bit about that. Just kind of your background,
Yeah, absolutely. And before I touch up on the background part, I want to touch up on what you said about you remember speaking to me almost 2 years ago, I think, on
something
that
like that.
deal. Yeah, that I was working on in Missouri. And up until now, Maritza, I have no idea how you track that owner down. I have
I don't even
no idea how you did
remember.
that. Yeah, I was calling you and I was like, "Hey, I've got this deal. Here's the situation." And it was like a owner of a owner of a owner. It's like a previous owner. And for I don't know how you did it. This is how freaking good Maritza was. She called me back like in 20 minutes. She's like, I found the guy on Facebook. Here's his number. I was like, what? How did you do that? Anyway, till this day, it's still in my mind. It's like, how did she do that?
I don't, I'm not sure. I just with wholesaling, when I was just doing wholesaling, I just got good at becoming like a private investigator of people, and it's really good. And that skill set really has helped me in like anything that I have done afterwards, because I mean anything, right? But I don't know. I still don't know how I did it. I actually totally forgot. But now that you're mentioning, I'm like, oh yeah, I do. I don't know. I found him on Facebook. I don't know how I found him on Facebook,
I don't
but
either.
I did
I don't
find
either.
him on Facebook, and
And and
it's
the crazy thing is that it wasn't like a unique name. It was kind of a common name, but you were
yeah.
still able to find this person. And I was like, how? And it was in 20 minutes, guys. Like, and she called me back immediately after, and she's like, I found the guy. I'm like, how did you do that? I've been looking for this guy for like 3 months and I couldn't find him.
Where there's a will, there's a way. But
Oh,
anyways, that's so funny.
just goes to show that when you talk to the right person who knows what the heck they're doing, then they'll do it right and quick and easy. Like you made it seem so easy, Maritza. And it
Thank
was
you.
such an amazing thing because that deal specifically, I was working on it for I want to say like 6 to 7 months, Maritza.
Oh
And
wow.
it had been a long deal, a very long one.
Wow, I
And
didn't know that.
yeah, and you were the missing piece. You were the one that helped me get that thing to the finish line. And it wasn't that great either when I closed the deal. It's finally like 7 months later. It was like it was an assignment fee, but it was very, very minimal. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that was a lot of work. Anyway, going back to the journey, right? So
Yeah.
for us specifically, Ione and I, if you don't know my girlfriend, Ione, you do know, but I'm talking about the audience.
Yeah.
Ione is the backbone. She is the reason why I am in real estate today. She is the reason why we've done wholesaling. She's the reason why we've done fix and flip. She's the reason why we've done multifamily. And I'm going to credit all that to her because that success that you guys see us getting, a lot of it's the mastermind, and that's her. She's the one in the background getting a bunch of stuff, the knowledge, the know-how. I just implement. I'm here. I'm happy to be here. And she's like, hey, here's what you need to do. And I go do it. I take the action, right? But we could not do what we do if it wasn't for her. So yes, I do at some point. I want to get her on here, Maritza, so you can talk to
We
her.
need to. We
And
need to.
yeah,
Everyone keeps telling me she's just amazing, but
yeah.
back to your amazingness, because no amazing woman, partners up with Amanda isn't amazing. So I'm sure that I know there are plenty of amazing qualities that you have, and that's why you're here. So
Yeah.
what got you into real estate? Was it Ione or was it something else?
Yeah, no, for sure. One day, Ione and I were at a party with our friends, like friends that we used to hang out with. And for whatever reason, I've never noticed this in myself, Maritza, but for whatever reason, a lot of the friends that I had and people just around me, they would trust me, they would like me, they would just kind of look up to me as some sort of like, I wouldn't say leader, but kind of like a leader, right? Always looking at me for knowledge and whatnot. They just trusted me a lot. And I think she noticed that, right? Ione noticed that. And so one day she came up to me and she asked me, what do you want to do? If you had anything that you can do in your life, what would you want to do? And back then, I didn't know how to answer that question, Marit. So that was a good question. I said, I don't know. I would probably just own a business or something like that. And she was like, okay, well, what kind of business? And I didn't know either. I was just like, you know what? At that point, I was hanging out with friends and I was like, you know what? I think owning a bar sounds pretty cool, right? I mean, you got a bar, you got your friends in there, you're having a good time, sure. And she was like, okay, cool. And I asked her the same question. I said, what about you? What would you want to do? And she said, I want to be in real estate. Would you like to do real estate with me if we had our own business? And I said, yeah, why not? Let's do it. And so the knowledge of real estate that I had back in the day, Maritza, was just how to become an agent. That's it. That's all the knowledge I had in real estate. I had no idea that there was a whole new world in investment and all that kind of stuff, especially creative finance. But she signed us up for this seminar. It was a 3 day no, I'm sorry, a weekend seminar, just one day. And she signed me up and she told me, hey, we're going to go on this day. Okay, cool. Sign me up. And I thought, honestly, Maritza, I thought that she was going to sign us up and I thought she was going to forget about it. I was like, okay, it's like 3 weeks from now, she's going to forget about it, right? And so the night before that event, we went to our friend's house and we started, having a good time, kind of partying, doing our thing. And let's just say I had one too many to drink, right? And so when I left there, I was already not doing so hot. And the next morning, that was the event. The next morning, I woke up with a major headache, super headache, bad mood. I didn't want to go anywhere. And she told me she did not forget, Maritza. She said, today is the event. You're going with me no matter what.
She held you accountable, she
She
said.
held me accountable. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was such in a bad mood. I was like in a bad mood. I was like, I don't want to go. But we went anyway. We made the drive. We get there. We start signing up. They're sitting us around in this event room in the hotel. And I'm just sitting there with a negative attitude thinking, okay, I know that there's going to be a speaker and I know that this speaker is probably going to try to sell us on something. Nothing's free. That was my mentality back then, right? It was like,
Right.
nothing's free. They're going to sell us something. I know it. And sure enough, this dude walks out and he starts talking about doing his spiel, his story. He starts talking about the real estate and all the different avenues. And like, I kid you not, I was slouching on my chair, right? When it first started with my arms folded, thinking I know it all type of guy, right? And as he kept going and going, I slowly started sitting up. And I was like, okay, interesting. And towards the middle of it, I was like into this guy, like I was listening. He had my full attention. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's completely right. And then towards the end of the whole thing, I was on the edge of my seat, Maritza. And I was ready. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, whatever this guy's about to tell me, I'm going to sign up for it no matter what. And as soon as they drop everything, it's like, hey, the next step is a 3 day event. Here's the location, here's the prices. Would you sign up for it? I looked at Ione. Ione looked at me. She goes, what do you think? And I said, heck yeah, I want to do it. Take my money. Basically what I said. And it was funny because my attitude changed from not wanting to be there to, okay, I'm ready to commit, right? And ever since then, we took our first step into getting into real estate. And that's what opened my mind in everything in real estate. Because I was like, oh my gosh, I only thought that there was just the agent side. I never knew that there was an investment side to it.
Right.
Never. And I felt like this was a secret that people had, that why doesn't everybody know about this? Right? Everybody you talk to, hey, real estate. Oh yeah, are you an agent? I'm like, no, there's a whole different side of it. So once we got into that 3 day event, then is when I started to learn a little bit more. And we start doing, they started teaching us the educational side a little bit more into depth, like the fix and flip, buy and holds, commercial. They tapped a little bit on a higher level and all this stuff, but it was so intriguing and I was so hooked in it that immediately after that event, of course, they pitched us another, right, another upsell.
Right.
And this
Right.
one was a mentorship program or a coaching program. And in this event, after it was a 3-day event, so day three, I looked at Ione and she looked at me again and she said, "Are we ready to do this? Do you want to do this?" And I said, "Yes, I am all in. Let's figure this out." And they took us to the back and they were like, "Did you guys want to do whatever?" And they had 3 different tiers. They had a like a low, medium, high tier. And for us, the medium tier was the one that we wanted to do. And the only problem with that was that it was $50,000.
Mm-hmm.
And Ione and I didn't have $50,000 liquid, right?
Right.
But we did have that money in different other forms.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did is we got creative right then and there, and the staff helped us out too, and we were able to pay that $50,000 right then and there. And as soon as we did that, we were all in. And that started our real journey into real estate. And that was just single family. And so that was about 4.5 years ago now. And from there, we started our journey into single family up until we started getting into multifamily. But that's kind of how we got started in the real estate world. And then after that, we just started progressing and doing more and more. And now you know what we do. We do multifamily at the moment. But that's how
Yeah.
we got started. It was because I didn't want to go, Maritza, but she held me accountable and she told me you gotta go, and that's what changed our lives. I'm so happy she did that. I told her you should have kicked my butt. Why? Why? Yeah, you should have told me let's go, and I'm glad you did. So that's where we got that's how we got into real estate.
I think that having the right partner really affects your future. So, what made, I mean, I don't know how long you and Ione have been together, but what got you interested in Ione and what has kept you guys together? Because, I mean, partners that do business together, and real estate is a business. I mean, you go through things that people that don't are not in business, they don't know, right? They don't understand. And so, what would you say about that? Because there's a lot of people that want to be in business with their partner, but they don't for one reason or another. So, what got you interested in Ione and what keeps you guys together doing business together?
It's funny because Ayoni asked me that question too when we first started dating, and then afterwards, right? She's like, why were you interested in me? And the honest truth was because Ione, I noticed her, like the way she noticed that I had potential, I noticed she had potential too. And for me, I noticed how smart this woman is. Like, I don't like being in a classroom setting. If you put me in a classroom setting in a traditional school setting, I will fall asleep. I will fall asleep. And that was the majority of my grade schooling is me falling asleep in the background.
Mm-hmm.
But Ione's a complete opposite. You put her in a classroom setting or anything to study material, and she will commit and she will find an answer. And that to me, aside from, of course, she's a queen, she's beautiful, I love her. That's what really got me interested in her is that I know that she can do so much, and both of us complementing each other will be unstoppable, right? And to answer your other question earlier, we've been together for 4 years and some change now. And so we've been together for a long time. And yes, you're right. Not all of it was, success or us being, a killer couple or whatever, right? It had, there's been a lots of downs with me and Ione as well,
Of course.
relationship wise and business wise, right? And all that is, it's kind of like we're we're contractually bound because of the business, but also we love each other because we are a couple. So it's like two different things. I think you have to balance. You have to balance the business side and you have to balance the personal side. And if you don't have that balance in between, then it can be really tough as a couple because you have to separate both of them. And that's been one of the toughest things we've ever had to do, Maritza, is separate business from our relationship. And if we don't make it a priority to separate both of those, then that's typically when things can get tough, right?
Right.
Because I don't want to look at her as just my business partner. I also want to look at her as my girlfriend, potential partner or partner, I mean, and things like that. That's the thing that we've been struggling with at the beginning when we first started is business, business, business. Okay, then when are we going to have time to date ourselves? Well, we'll find
Right.
it eventually, right? It's tough. You really have to sit down and say, okay, after this, whatever, time block it, right? If you have to. After X amount of time, we're not talking about business, we're just dating each other. Once we started to figure that stuff out, Maritza, then things got easier as they came along. But that was the whole trick at the beginning, is finding out how to balance those two. And once we did that, things started looking better. And now we have a better understanding of how we both work and then when to cut off business and date each other.
Love that. I love that. And I think that's something that everyone that's a couple and in business, they all, it's like the balance find, or it's hard to find. I don't think balance is the right word, but you're trying to mesh two
Yeah.
parts of your life together, and like what's the best way, and every couple is different, right? So and okay, moving on. So I know you've mentioned you guys also did fix and flip. So how did
We
that
did.
go? How was that journey?
Our first deal that we tried to do fix and flip on did not work. And the reason I say that is because that was part of our first mentorship, the $50,000 that I told you about. We were looking at houses left and right. I mean, as soon as we ended that mentorship, Ione and I took action, and we were just looking at houses really, really fast. And we finally found one that I still remember till this day, and Ione does too, and we thought we had the one. And so we started budgeting per our mentorship program, and they teach you how to, estimate your repairs and all that kind of stuff. And we brought in a contractor as well. And the contractor, he goes in there and he looks at everything, and we compare our estimate with his estimate. And of course, we did not know what to prepare for. His estimate came up way higher than what we were expecting, right? And so this particular deal that we looked at, we were like, should we pull the trigger or should we not pull the trigger? And it was our first one. So we were scared, right? And we ended up not pulling the trigger on that one because we didn't feel like we were prepared enough to do it. And to be quite frank, we were just scared. That's all it
Right.
was, right? We were scared to do it because it was a lot of money to us back then. And so the next property that we did, we were a lot more equipped, better knowledge and everything. We just had better things going for us. And that was the house that I grew up on, the house that I grew, like the childhood home that we had, right? My dad
Wow.
let me do whatever I wanted to do with that house. He
Oh,
goes, you
wow.
can wholesale it if you want, you can fix and flip if you want, you can buy and hold if you want. Here's what I want. And obviously I gave my dad the options, right? I told, okay, if I wholesale, here's what's gonna happen. If I fix and flip, here's what happens. And if I buy and hold, here's what happens. Ultimately, we ended up deciding, why don't we fix and flip it? Because it would be a beautiful transformation. This is a house that I grew up in, my family grew up in, and it'd be nice to see a before and after and then give it off to another family, right? That would be the ultimate fulfillment that everybody would be proud of. And so we got started on the project. Unfortunately, again, this was our first one. We did not plan for all the hiccups and surprises that came up the property, right? So the first fix
Which
and flip,
always happens in a flip.
always, yeah. The the one of the first things that we knew that there was trouble with was the foundation. We just didn't know how bad it was, right?
Mm,
And then once we started getting into it, we found out that it was truly bad, really, really bad. And then the other thing that we thought was okay that might need a little bit of work was the plumbing. In fact, the plumbing was terrible. It was almost all needed to be replaced. So that was another big ticket item. And then the other one that we knew that also needed work was the roof, but we didn't know how bad the roof was until we got in there. And so right after jump, the foundation, the plumbing, and the roof.
you're
The
making a new
three,
house.
yeah, exactly. The biggest things that you didn't think would be that bad, they were the worst.
Right.
And our budget, I think, was $50,000 for repairs, and it went up to, just with those three items was $40,000.
Mm,
And that didn't leave us that much for anything else, right? Like there was still
right.
exterior paint that needed to be done, all the flooring, all the interior paint and some of the touch-ups. And well, we needed to redo the bathroom as well. And then we needed to redo, I think, the kitchen. So basically it was a full flip, right? Full gut everything. And so we were not prepared for that. We didn't budget for it. And so that project ended up going longer than expected, more money than we expected, and almost not being able to sell this property. And we were going to have to take a loss. We were this close to taking a loss on this property. But because the market was still in our favor, right? And this was during the time where the market was still good,
Yep.
we were able to still sell it off. Now, I did end up wholesaling the property, and it was enough to recoup all of our losses, still pay out some of the equity that my dad had, pay off our private money lender with a return, and for us to make a return as well. So we were
Good.
still able to bounce back because we did have fail safes. We had a plan A, which was a fix and flip, plan B, which is institutional buyer in case I needed to wholesale it, and then plan C was just wholesaling to one of the buyers that I have here in Dallas. And then if I had to do a plan D, that would have been a buy and hold and just recoup our losses through time, right? But those were the strategies that we had in place, and luckily we only went to plan C, and that one worked, and we were still able to do everything that we need to do on that. And right now, oh, I forgot to mention one more thing. Right now, we are doing another fix and flip. I partnered up with a couple of people from the community that we know, Sub 2, and we're doing a $1 million flip in Fort Worth at the moment. And that
Nice.
will, yeah, that one will be done. I think we're gonna either market it this month or late. I think it's late this month that we're gonna start marketing the property, but it's about done, and the property looks beautiful. So we're definitely long ways from where we came from.
Good. What a turnaround. Way to turn it around, Oscar. You started with we almost lost our money and we didn't break even, but we made a little bit of money, which honestly, when you're investing, when you don't lose money, it's a win because I mean, it's always going to be a risk, right? No, there is no investment that has zero risk. So the
Absolutely.
fact that you made money on it, and I'm sure you learned a lot from that, right? So I think that what stood out the most to me from what you were saying though is that Ione is smart because I know Ione is the underwriter, like the analyst of your team, or at least one of them. Having a plan A, B, C, and a D. You know how little amount of people actually think about doing that. They're just like, I'm going to do this and this is all I'm going to do. Where the good thing about real estate, as we both know, is there's millions of ways to make sure you make money on a house or multifamily or whatever it is, right? But most people don't think of all the other different ways, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And some of that came and due because we had private money involved, right?
mhm,
And when you have private money, you have to perform, right? You have to perform. And you know, a lot of the times is how you ask yourself, how can you protect them, right? Because that's probably one of the better things, or one of the questions that we ask ourselves when we have any private money is, how can we protect them, right? And so for us, having those options were really to protect that person. Right. Aside
love
from
it.
it being my dad's house, of course we were going to give my dad, but he was going to win no matter what. Right. We just wanted to make sure that whatever option we chose, we were going to be able to protect them as well.
Love it. And now from protecting your investors, right, which can be transitioned into multifamily with limited partners if you're doing a syndication or just if you have, one JV partner that, is basically your keep your sponsor on the deal. Um, Tell us a little bit about that and how you guys make sure to use what you learned in single family into now into commercial.
Yeah, good question. It's a little bit different on the structure when you talk about syndication, right? But I think one of the biggest things that I see whenever we're talking to some of our investors is you can have a great deal all day, every day. You can have an absolutely amazing deal. But if you don't have the people backing you up who know, like, and trust you, then they
Mm-hmm.
will never invest with you.
Mm-hmm.
They will never invest with you. So us talking to some of our investors, the only reason that they partner up with us is because they like, know, and trust us. And and it wasn't like that to begin with, Maritza. I'll tell you that. I'll be completely transparent. The very first deal we had in multifamily, we thought we had a smoking hot deal. I mean, it looked freaking amazing, Maritza. You're talking about returns that definitely were like, whoa, anybody would do this deal, right? That's what we thought.
Right, right.
We were like, wow, there's no way nobody can say no to this deal. Now, fast forward to when we started actually pitching it to some of our future investors, and every which one of them not only told us no,
Mm-hmm.
but they said, here's our returns, here's what we want. And so the problem with that specific deal is that we had it structured incorrectly. We had it structured where us as the operators were making the majority of the returns,
Oh, I
and
see.
them as the investors weren't making that much great of a return, right? So it was structured wrong. So again, that's why I said you can have a smoking hot deal. It looks good, but if you don't have it structured correctly, or if you don't have the right investor base, then you'll quickly find out, as we did, that you either have to pivot or restructure the deal. And once we took this model, Maritza, this is what changed the game for us. Our investors come first. Once
Mm-hmm.
we had that mindset, everything shifted, because we want to keep those relationships and we want to make sure that they're happy and protected at all times. Our investors come first. We took that business model, we restructured the deal, and then the returns look so much better for the investors. And then they were like, yes, I would do a deal like this.
For sure. I mean, you just got to take care of the people that are taking care of you, really, because without the money, I mean, you can't do the deal, right? So,
Exactly. And then you talked about a little bit about how we protect our investors, right? So for us particularly, again, I mentioned like, trust, and know you, right? And when
hmm
we talk to our investors, we are completely transparent with them, 100%, all the way through. The more transparent you can be with your investors, the more that they will trust you. And so we had told them from the beginning, it's like, look, it is, a certain class, whatever class that may be, and here's what the risk may involve, right? Here's how we're going to mitigate those risks. It doesn't mean that they're not going to happen, and it doesn't mean that your investment still isn't risky, but this is how we're going to mitigate everything, right? And so us not only having the proper paperwork in place, right, with your attorney, which I would recommend you do and get an attorney for any multifamily deal you do, especially if you have investors. We have them protected on the contractual side, and then we have them protected on the business plan and what we're going to implement, followed by the team. This is the most important part, the operators who
hmm
are actually doing the work. That itself gave the investors so much comfort, right? Or I'm sorry, not comfort. Maybe like what's a better word for it? Like anyway, they felt
Just
comfortable.
mitigated the risk. Yeah, they felt comfortable making
Yeah,
the investment because you
exactly.
mitigated the risk on all ends, really.
Exactly. And again, it didn't start off that way, Maritza. That was us listening to our investors at first, and asking them, what is your biggest concern? Give me feedback so I can become better. And they were like, oh, maybe you should do this, maybe you should do that. And all that was us learning how to, handle those objections before they come objections, right? And so once we did that, we got it we got very good at explaining it and protecting them and making sure that every question that they had was answered, or if they didn't, they would get that question answered at the end. So that's how we go about talking to our investors and making sure that they are protected in any deal that they do with us.
Amazing. What are some common objectives or uncommon objectives that surprised you the most when you were entering the multifamily space, right? Because you have to raise typically a lot more capital in commercial transactions than in single family residential.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. And here's one that I don't hear many people talk about, especially in the multifamily space. When you're talking to investors and say you've got to go raise some capital for your deal, you're going to go ask investors for whatever amount that you need for your deal. And one of the things that I did not expect and I did not know how to handle when I was newer was when the investors would ask us as the general partners, well, if I'm going to put in this much money, how much are you guys putting into your own deal?
Right.
And I've never thought about that. And everyone talks about no money, doing this, you can do it with no money, you can do it with no experience, you just need to go and take action. That was one of the things that I was not prepared for, Maritza, is when they told me, how much money are you guys putting in?
Mm-hmm.
And it absolutely made sense when I thought about it, because you're asking your investors to put in money into your deal, especially if you're new, right? They're putting in money into your deal. They're taking most of the risk, which is why you're giving a lot of times the majority of the equity to them, because they're putting in the capital. Now, for us, if we're not putting any money into our own deal, then how confident, or what does that tell our investors, right? What
Right.
does that tell them, right? You're putting all the money, they're putting all the money in, but we're not putting any of our own money in. What's going on here? Why aren't they not putting any money? If they're telling me this deal is such a good deal, then why don't they put in their own money? Right? And so once we figured that part out, I was like, you know what? Absolutely makes sense. That's one of the things that I wish I would have learned going in, because that is a fair question for your investors to ask you. It is 100% fair. You're asking them to put in money. Why can't they ask you the same question? Right? And
Of
so you need to
course.
be prepared to answer that question if you are going out there and you're the one raising capital. Absolutely 100%. You need to be prepared to answer that. And that's what I learned the most, Maritza. That's what I would say. I don't see that anybody teaching that. Obviously there's different ways to structure a deal. I'm just saying the way we did it is that's what I learned from that specific deal.
Love it. Did that kind of change your outlook on how to structure deals moving forward, or how much money you guys were going to put in as a GP team, or,
Yeah,
what did it
100%.
change?
100%. It definitely opened up our eyes to, okay, so if we're going to do a deal again, right, then we need to be prepared to handle that objection. And first of all, I'm tired of someone asking me that question, right? So I'm going to make sure that if they do ask me that question, I know what to say, and I know the number, right? The number that I'm putting in, I can answer it confidently. But second is, some of the other things, this is kind of part two to that question, right? This is another thing I wish someone would have taught us, is the upfront cost to actually do a multifamily deal,
Hmm.
right? Again, a lot of people talk about no money, this and that, but there is a couple of things that you need to keep in mind, whether it's you or private money, whatever, that are upfront costs that need to be taken care of. And that's the EMD, the earnest money deposit. That's fees for an attorney, because an attorney will ask for upfront, or a retainer sometimes. Things like your inspections, right? You need to do all your inspections. The lender will ask for fees up front. And then, if you do like a CPA, accounting, financial audit, that's up front. And if you do the property management company, sometimes they charge a service to do a lease audit. So all these different types of upfront costs that I wish someone had prepared us for were things that we were not prepared for when we first started. So going forward, handling these deals, yes, that is the number one concern we have, Maritza, is how are we going to handle what we call the risk capital? That's the
Hmm.
upfront cost, right? Either one, we're because that's why you asked me earlier if I was still wholesaling. Yes, I am
Yeah.
wholesaling, because all that money that I would make as active income would go into a deal that I do in multifamily to cover those specific costs. Or two, this is another structure that you can do that nobody taught us, that I wish someone would have taught us, is you can bring in a partner who can cover those upfront risk capitals in order for them to get that GP, general partner equity, right? So that's another strategy that you can do, or you can simply go get private money, but that still has to get paid off somehow, right? So there's different things, different ways you can structure it, but those are the three things that we look for when we are looking at a new deal is, what is the risk capital going to be, and how can we take care of that?
Great, great information. And now that you're in both, right? You're in residential and you're also in commercial. So what would you say are the pros and cons of each? Because both of them have their benefits and their, the things you don't like about them. So what would you say you love about or hate about residential, what you love and don't like about commercial, right?
Yeah, good question. One of the biggest things that we ran into as a team was, yes, we committed to multifamily and we got 70 units under 7 months, which was an amazing, amazing achievement.
It's amazing.
Absolutely. But you talk about multifamily is a long-term game, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is not a get rich quick, not at all. And if you're looking for that, it's not going to be for you. And so for us, we had to figure out how to balance active income and passive income, right? Multifamily is a lot of passive income, and you're setting yourself up for the future. And as a general partner, you do get paid out, I'd say about 3 times throughout your deal. The first one is the acquisition fee upfront. And then the second one is your asset management, depending on who is the asset manager of that deal. So they're getting paid either monthly or quarterly. And then the exit, right? When you sell or refinance, then there's another way you pay yourself that way. So, but that's long term. It's not like one deal you're going to be making a killing, especially if you're new, right? And so you still have to find a way to support yourself. You still got bills to pay, you still got
Mm-hmm.
food you gotta, buy, and the
Mm-hmm.
lights gotta be turned on, everything like that, right? So for us, we had to sit down as a team and be like, okay, we have to still make active income because
Mm-hmm.
multifamily, yes, it pays you, but it takes longer and it's not a lot. You don't get a big payday up front, so you still have to balance both of them. So for us, we do single family, and we have time allotted for it every day that we just do wholesale. And I told you we're doing that fix and flip. And for us in the multifamily, we then split the time for just multifamily itself. And so balancing those things out is one of the things. Now, the pros and cons about single family, multifamily, single family, the I say the con is scalability, is that it takes longer to scale. But
Right.
the pro is you can make active income quicker depending on what strategy you do, whether it's wholesaling or fix and flip or whatever it is. I would say that's one of the biggest pros for it. And then on multifamily, the con is that it takes longer, right? It can take a while, especially if you're new. It took us about 4 months to get our first deal, but that was us being very committed. Yeah, it could be longer for you, so it's a longer term. So that's the con. It takes long, and the pro is that it's scalability. It's super scalable. Like you can scale really quickly just by one deal if you have like 40 units, 30, or I'm sorry, 40, 50, 100 units. You can scale really quickly, but it's just that it takes longer. So those are the pros and cons that I would say single family versus multifamily.
Got it. Great explanation. Because a lot of people, when you're in residential, sometimes you look at commercial like, wow, look at that. And then when you're in commercial, sometimes you're like, I wait, like, it's like you're, oh, in real estate, it's like the constant squirrel syndrome, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
oh, there's something new. Oh, there's something
Yeah.
new. Like you just get distracted. And so it's good when someone that is in both actually breaks it down.
Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to ask you is it's been about 4 years, right? Or 4.5 years, I think you said, since you started in real estate. So what would you tell the younger Oscar? Before you started, you've done a lot of different deals, a lot of different things and different niches in real estate now. So what would you have told the younger Oscar, maybe the one before he went to the workshop, that you now know 4.5 years later?
Yeah. I've asked myself that question tons of times, looking back, right? Um, I would say that I would tell younger Oscar two things. I would say one, don't get the squirrel syndrome, right? The shiny object syndrome. Focus on one thing and master it, and then move on to the next one. And then the second, I would say the biggest shortcut is to get a mentor, and not just any mentor, but the mentor that's in that specific area or industry or whatever you're doing. Find that person and get mentored by that person because that will cut your learning curve in half. So I would say focus on one thing and master it. And the second is get a mentor who's doing that same thing that you want to do and go for it. That's what I would tell them. Because at first we were shooting everywhere, Maritza. It was crazy. And I regret that. But hey, now I know what I know, right?
Well,
I
you
wouldn't take it
learned,
back.
yeah, you learned from a lot of different. I feel like when you do that, it's because you like learning.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. It's just picking what's the best play. right? Like, what's the best play at hand? What's going to help me the most in the future? And so, what does your future look like right now? I know that you've probably thought about this. I know you guys have a goal that you are striving and working every day to achieve. But what is the bigger vision? Like, aside from multifamily, I know you want. I think it's 1,000 units by July.
Mhm.
But what does that vision look like? What does your future look like?
Yeah, so interesting question. I don't know that many people have asked me that, but multifamily for us, or real estate, I would say real estate for us is something that we love. It's a passion. And I don't see us ever going away from that. Like we say we want 1,000 units, but I already talked to the team and it's probably going to turn after we get to 1,000, it's probably going to turn to 3,000. It's probably going to go to 5,000 after that, and then so on and so forth. But in reality, we're setting the foundation for what we truly want to do. And I'm going to speak for Ione a little bit, but Ione wants to do mission type of work, right? So she wants to go to third world countries and help out medically because she comes from a registered nurse medical background, right? And also provide food and all that kind of stuff. That's what she truly wants to do, and that's what real estate will allow her to do once we get there. And for me, I don't know if I've ever said this before, but the foundation that I want to set with real estate is for me to go and do what I really want to do, and that's get into esports. So like video games and things like
Oh.
that, right? That's what I really want to do. And so this will lay that foundation. And even in esports, I can be the owner of that venue, right, as a real estate asset and host those types of events because that's what I really am passionate about, is that's what I love to do, and that's what I'm striving for. And so once I get this real estate thing all covered, then I'll go transition into that at some point in the future.
What makes you passionate about that?
Because we grew up playing video games, that was how all my family bonded with each other, all my brothers and sisters.
Mm.
We grew up playing video games, and that's what we loved, and we talked about it all the time, and we did a bunch of stuff together. Some of my fondest memories were of all of us gathered in one room just playing like a video game, or either watching or playing it together, right? And so for me, I've always wanted to host a big event like tournaments and that type of thing. And that's just been my passion since day one. And my family, I've got an older brother that also wants to do it with me, and so I would take them with me and get it done.
And how do you feel about like being in business with family? Because right now, I mean, I know that your team, you guys are like pretty good friends from what I can tell from an outsider's perspective.
Yeah.
And you're also in business with Ione, which is, your partner. So how do you feel about that? Like just mixing the friendships, mixing family and also in business.
Well, that's one of the things that we had to learn the hard way, unfortunately, right? So there has been some past businesses that we've tried running outside of real estate that affected the friendship or the relationships that were prior to getting into business, right? And so those were things that we had to figure out again. And unfortunately, we didn't have the formula figured out. We now we know, right? Like maybe we shouldn't have done it this way, and things like that. And so for me, mixing the family in there would definitely have to be what I would say upfront contracts, right? Not only upfront contracts, but clear separation in what we need to do and what roles need to be done. And I think the experience that we've had with real estate and running our business here will definitely help out in how I can lead the new business going into esports if I do bring in family. Okay, I'm way more experienced now than I was before, so
Right.
now I can clearly lead the direction on where we need to go and set up those upfront contracts and expectations going forward. I think that's how I can mitigate a lot of the stuff because that's what's been the previous factor in some of the things that why we didn't work out is because we didn't lay those expectations up front. And so now knowing what I know, that's how I would take care of it going forward.
So, what kind of expectations? And the reason I ask this is because I know a lot of people that are entering into business right now because I mean, there are a lot of people in this day and age that are getting laid off, unfortunately. And it's not COVID, but it seems to be like a different market that we're in. And so people start venturing off into different things. And sometimes they do it with family. So, what would you say in detail, like what are some expectations you would say they should discuss so that they don't have those, bad feelings after the fact, going into it?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I would lay down as an expectation is I think everybody needs to put in their value into the business, because I think if we don't cover one of those expectations up front, like, hey, what is it that you bring to the table? It's kind of those things that a lot of people don't talk about, right? And that's what
Right.
some of our previous conversations have been about, and sometimes why the businesses or relationships failed is because we didn't have those upfront conversations of what is it that you're going to bring to the table, or what is it that you're actually going to do, what's your role, and like, how are we going to do it going forward, right? And it's one of those things that now, Maritza, to be honest with you, when we do a deal with anybody going forward, is that's the first thing we cover is, okay, let's sit down and get the tough conversation out the way, right? If we're going to do this deal together, here's the roles that need to be done, who's going to take what, who's going to do what, and based on that, what is going to be the splits amongst everybody, right? And yes, another thing I would say is, yes, those types of expectations probably will change or can change, and you have to be open to it, like us having to pivot, right, and having to do another direction, because I think that sometimes I want to say this, okay, I do want to say this. It is okay for a plan to fail and you have to pivot. I want to say that, because a lot of the times, if the plan doesn't go according to plan, right, the way you wanted to do it, then all that can go. People will think you failed or whatever, right? So I would say it's okay for the plan or the goal to change, but also instilling or telling those people up front that, you know, here's what's going to happen, here's what needs to be done, the roles and everything like that. I would say that's the biggest thing that I would say as an expectation that needs to be laid up front.
That's great advice. And I think a lot of people forget about that because a lot of people don't like, it feels a little confrontational, and it's like, oh, I want to avoid this conflict and I just don't want to, and it's like, yeah, but my dad always says this. And I mean, my dad in Spanish would tell me, es mejor ponerse rojito un momento que blanco toda la vida. It's like, let's just get it out there and talk about it. And then you could just brush that along, right?
Yeah.
So I think that was great advice. And the other thing I wanted to ask was your mindset certainly had to change from when you were first starting out to when you were in the middle to when you where you are at now. So what would you say has been the biggest mindset shift that you had, in doing real estate and in being in business and being an entrepreneur that has helped you achieve the success that you have now?
So there's two biggest mindset shifts that I went through. And the first one was not even that long ago. It might have been like a year and some change. And that was when we first started to dabble into multifamily. And the part that the mind shift was more because there was someone depending on the success of the deal for me to perform. And once you have someone who's actually depending on you, like an employee or a partner or someone like that, it changes the game.
Right.
Like, you have to perform at that point. There's no option. Like, you just have to. And so them sending me multifamily leads was one of the first things that changed my mindset, because before then I was doing nothing but single family. So I was used to looking at purchase prices of like anywhere from like 200,000 maybe all the way up to 350,000, something like that, right? And when they started bringing me these leads in multifamily in Dallas, you're talking about multi-million dollar deals, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so this person bringing me this deal, the first one I did, I think was like a $5 million purchase price. And so you talk about a drastic difference between single family and multifamily. When I heard that purchase price and I was talking to the seller, Maritza, I internally freaked out. He said $5 million, and I'm like, what did he say in my mind, right?
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like, ever since then, these purchase prices have been in that ballpark, right? In the $1 million range. So that the first one was having someone that was, dependent on me making sure I get my stuff done. That was my first mindset shift. The second one happened a couple months after that, when I found myself leading a team, and that's the $1 million upside team that you know of. And again, it's now I'm talking about I have to perform, because not only is my life, the only one that's going to change if we do this, but it's going to change their lives as well.
Right.
And that to me was the driving force behind what I did every single day. Even though I didn't feel like getting up, Maritza, in the mornings, I rolled out of bed and I still got up even when I didn't feel like getting up. And those people held me accountable without actually holding me accountable. It's just that every single day I got up to do the work because I knew that there was other people's lives involved, not just mine. And that forced me. It wasn't even an option. It just, for whatever reason, sometimes I woke up like a zombie, but I still got up, right? And that was the two mindset shifts, is at the beginning of multifamily, and then when I started leading the team, I was like, there's no way I can fail. I have to change who I am. And I've never looked back ever since.
And it looks like both really is because you have someone depending on you, right? There's someone else. And so I completely relate to that, because when you're a solopreneur, as I was, I don't know if you were, but it changes when you have a team, doesn't
Yeah.
it? It's just like, because it's no longer just about you.
Exactly. And so purposely, I've put myself in positions where I have to perform, right? Like I told you earlier, there was that private money lender when our first fix and flip, right? I put myself in that position on purpose because I wanted to be able to perform, and there was no looking back. It's like when you burn the boats, right? And you have to go forward. That's exactly what I put myself in. And so I've noticed that when I do that, there's no option for me but to go forward. And doing that has helped me a lot throughout my journey for sure.
Love it. So we're ending here at the last 5 minutes, and I like to ask, I know that within your time period of being an entrepreneur, it happens to everyone, especially when you're starting out. You have highs and lows all the time, because you make a lot of money at one point and you're like, this is amazing. And then you don't have deal flow and you're like, well, what is going on? Right? Like you just always want to be closing things, especially in real estate, right? So, my main question to you is, you mentioned that with even with Ione, you guys have had lows. And in your business, I'm sure there's also been lows, right? Where something had to keep you moving,
Yeah.
even though you didn't want to. And I know you said one of them was your team or the people that depended on you. But what made you get out of bed when you didn't have a team? Like, was it just a dream? Was it just you're just an amazing disciplined person? Like, is it, because I'm thinking about the people that will listen to
Mhm.
this. And I mean, we all have our own set of darkness, right, in our life.
Yeah.
And no one likes talking about it. But I mean, I'm really open with mine. So I'd like to hear from your perspective, what advice would you give someone going through that you could possibly give your younger self when you were dealing with that, right? So,
Yeah, and it wasn't always like that when I first started, because when I first started, I was like, you know what? Ione was working back then, right? So she still had a W-2, and we could still survive even if we didn't do anything with real estate. So it wasn't like that. But it wasn't until one day, Maritza, I got a phone call from my dad, and I didn't pick it up because I was still sleeping. So dumb. And then like 10 minutes later, I get another phone call from my dad. And this time I pick it up, but I'm like dead asleep. I'm like a zombie. And it's not my dad who's on the other line. It's a coworker of my dad. And they say, "Hey, we're headed to the hospital. Your dad has had an accident." He's
oh
like, "Can you meet
Lord.
us there at the hospital?" Here's what hospital we're at. That's all they told me. They didn't tell me what kind of accident, nothing. And so I got up real quick, didn't even shower because I was so freaking,
Yeah.
yeah, scared, right? So I went over there to the hospital, and they said your dad had a heart attack at work.
God.
and he's in emergency right now. He's getting surgery. And so, long story short, everything turned out fine. But what got me going ever since that point was that I almost lost my dad. And I didn't pick up that phone call. Because I didn't pick up that phone call, it could have been, my dad on the other line asking for something, but it was, it is what it is. So that's what pushes me now. My why is because I want to make sure that my parents are set for life and they don't ever have to worry about it ever again, because I don't know if my parents will be here next year or the year after, because it can be taken like that. And I want them to be able to see me and Ione succeed in what we're doing and us taking care of them the rest of their life. That's why I do what I do.
That's amazing. That made me want to cry. Oh my goodness, that made it so real. Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that wasn't uh, easy, right, when it happened. And I don't know, maybe not easy to share either, but I think it's a great life lesson that we can all implement in our own day-to-day lives, whether
Yes.
you're business, real estate, doesn't really matter, right? So, um, well, I want to thank you for being on the show. I think you left it at a high point. Like we're just gonna leave it there. That cannot get any better than that. And where can people follow you, connect with you? If they want to do deals with you, where should they go to connect with you?
Yeah, Instagram, my tag is at Oscar Jimenez 10x. Just reach out to me on Instagram and I will follow up with you.
Love it. Do you also want them to reach out via, I know you guys have a Facebook group as well. And
Yes.
I just
Facebook.
want, yes, because I
Yeah.
just want to put you guys on because you guys are giving so much great free information on multifamily if people want to get started on that.
Yeah.
Um,
If they want to reach out to us on our and check out our Facebook group, it's Multifamily, the Million Dollar Upside. And that's how you can get plugged into anything and everything multifamily with us. And we do everything there. We lives and whatnot. We'll announce it at that page.
Love it. Well, it was a pleasure having you. And I can't wait to see you and Ione's success and you be able to maybe take a picture with your dad and be like, look what I did for you.
Exactly. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you so much. I hope you have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye bye.